All right, today we're going to talk about estrogen dominance, why it's not normal, PMS. People talk about PMSing monthly. That's not normal. Here are the symptoms: short cycles, heavy flow, cramps, water retention, breast tenderness. Very commonly, you're going to see mood irritability, depression, and anxiousness. These things getting worse monthly. Headaches also very common. So all of these things that are abnormal are typically caused by estrogen dominance. What is estrogen dominance? Well, estrogen is dominating the hormone pool. So you've got too much estrogen. That's either from, here's the pathway. That is either that everything is just constantly, there's a high demand for estrogen. So you either have too much, demanding too much, or you're not breaking it down in the liver, and so it's building up more than it should. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. I think it's important to understand. This is a little bit of biochem, but I think hopefully this is super easy to understand. So all of your hormones start out as cholesterol, which I don't have here, but that cholesterol turns into pregnenolone. Don't have to remember that. But that can turn into progesterone, which that can turn into estrogen. So the only two I want you to focus on are progesterone and estrogen. Okay. So it is typically that you're either not making enough of this or you're making too much of that. The ratio is off. Now you can sometimes resolve some of these issues by medicating with progesterone. I don't recommend that as a first intervention, especially if your symptoms aren't super severe. There's not really innately a huge problem with that unless you have too much of this, because you're going to end up demanding more and more and more of this estrogen. So let's talk about how to resolve these things naturally. So if the problem is we are making too much estrogen, that means that we are aromatazing estrogen quickly. Aromatase is a estrogen accelerator. That can come from testosterone, and that can come from androstenedione. So one way that can be driven is through, very commonly, insulin. So excessive amounts of insulin. If you are diabetic, if you are already a little overweight, you kind of know if you're in this category, you probably are aromatazing too much estrogen. And then once you have this insulin issue, which is a fat storage hormone, you develop more fat tissue, and then that drives more estrogen, which is just going to make everything worse. So addressing the blood sugar issue is primary in this case if you're under chronic stress, and we'll talk about how stress hormones are related to inflammation and other blood sugar issues. That should be resolved as well, but control what you can control. And when you have an insulin issue, we'll talk about it at the bottom, but I'll just mention it now. Exercise, cut the sugar out, eat good fat, and you'd be surprised at the progress you can make with this type of issue. So if it is making too much, you likely have something like this going on, but just as common, if not more common, you have a problem breaking down the excess estrogen. Even if you're aromatazing too much estrogen, you still have a problem breaking it down. Even if it's Christmas or Christmas Eve and Amazon's backed up with packages, it still could use more help with those packages to get those through, and you could reduce symptoms that way. So phase 1, phase 2, I didn't write out all of the pathways within these. There are 3 in phase 2 specifically, but what we'll talk about today are the most common ones. So in phase 2, you have very commonly magnesium, zinc, and B6. So Why do we get anxious, irritable, and sometimes have depression associated with our cycle? That is because all neurotransmitters, which modulate our mood, in the medical world, will trap those and keep them from leaving, and that will make us feel better. It's one way to do it. Alternatively, you could look at, why aren't you producing enough GABA to make us less anxious? Why are we irritable? Why are we not feeling good about ourselves? Aside from, and there's no environmental reason to feel that way. It could come down to biochemistry, and at least it's not helping. I'm not saying it's the only way to address it, but it's definitely not helping when you're not making enough of these things. So they all start out as proteins, and then tryptophan, tyrosine, and glutamate. I didn't write them all out because I don't want to confuse. It's already probably overwhelming probably lost most of you already, but if you're still hanging on, good for you. It all starts out as protein, and we use these things called cofactors, which are vitamins and minerals. We're just talking about the most common ones: magnesium, zinc, B6. The activated form is P5P, so some people talk about it as P5P. Okay, so magnesium, zinc, B6 may help with these symptoms, these mood-related symptoms, and would also help with detoxing the estrogen, so helping with cycle issues. So you might see help with both. Now, while I like to make people feel better and help resolve their symptoms, it's also nice to figure out what's driving those particular deficiencies. So commonly, we'll look at this down here. It is inflammation, some sort of blood sugar issue, and feeding into it a lot of the times is some sort of stress hormone issue. So really quick, the background here, how does that relate to magnesium, zinc, and B6? Those nutrients helping to make neurotransmitter, but also breaking down estrogen. Maybe you've heard of fish oil. It's anti-inflammatory. Our body actually makes it out of the good fats that we eat, the omega-3s. How do we do that? We use magnesium, zinc, B6 to turn it into fish oil. Okay, if we have a low blood sugar issue, and we're constantly fighting to bring up our blood sugar, we're draining magnesium, zinc, B6 to turn glycogen into glucose. Even athletes, you'll see this problem. Somebody who's demanding a lot of magnesium, zinc, B6 out of themselves because they're constantly driving more glucose production. Alternatively, we have other hormones in the body besides sex hormones, and commonly those are stress hormones that are in excess: cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine. I've got these arrows here because anytime you have a low blood sugar issue, you're going to be driving stress hormones. So we need to resolve the stress hormone issue. And anytime we have inflammation, your body's producing cortisol, trying to manage that inflammation that way. So essentially, resolving these two things can make huge impacts. So I opened both of them. Hopefully that's not too overwhelming. But inflammation, I always start with the gut. If you have gut symptoms, you need to resolve those gut things. Check out my gut video. If you have immune-related problems or auto-inflammatory issue, after you've resolved the gut, you still have an inflammation issue. A lot of times it's something to do with the immune system. You're reacting to foods, heavy metals. There's some other chronic infection that's going on. There are a lot of options, and it's very complicated. You should seek out somebody who knows what they're doing when it comes to that. After you've worked on some of the more straightforward things, this, even if you know what you're doing, can be very difficult to treat. Okay. So, with the blood sugar, much more straightforward than inflammation. You're either high or you're low, or you're normal. If you're normal, move on. But a lot of times people have glimpses of either. So momentarily they may have low blood sugar issues. Somebody who has high blood sugar would do better with fasting, skipping breakfast, exercising more. Supplements like chromium, berberine can be helpful to help improve insulin sensitivity, which would bring your blood sugar back down. If you have low blood sugar, you want 3 balanced meals: good protein, good fat, about 20 to 30 grams of protein, 20 to 30 grams of fat, maybe even a little more depending on your size. No fasting for low blood sugar. You want to eat breakfast. And you want those 3 meals to be about 5 hours apart, no snacking. And the thing with exercise, chronic exercise could actually cause problems with this. I love exercise, but if it's excessive, you know who you are. If you're not recovering from workouts, if you're overtraining, this could be contributing to your problem as well, as far as having an estrogen dominant issue. So it could be affecting your cycle. Okay, so that was the quick and dirty overview of drivers of these cofactor deficiencies that could be causing you a backlog or an excessive amount of estrogen because you're not breaking it down with enough of the Amazon employees during Christmas time. So we talked about that. They're good. Yeah, so I went through that super quick, but if you have any questions, the last thing I guess we could mention is taking things extrahepatically, meaning outside of the liver, supporting inside the liver, magnesium, zinc, B6. Cysteine is also good. That's one of those pathways. But again, to make cysteine, you need magnesium, zinc, B6. Phase 1 is like glutathione, cytochrome P450 pathway. Doesn't matter. Rosemary is extrahepatic support, so it detoxes estrogen outside of the liver. I try not to rely too heavily on this because taking this, while it will help with the estrogen problems, it's not resolving, well, it can still take the pressure off. So it could still help with some of these secondary symptoms. But it's kind of cheating. I guess you could still do it. It's okay. But I would definitely work on looking at what inflammatory issue or what blood sugar issue, whether that's high or low, do you have going on that could be contributing to your problem. You'd be surprised that even at younger ages, that they still have these issues. Sometimes when it's like first starting out and they have these issues and they start and they just don't stop, then it could be the fact that they're not quite making enough progesterone, and you need to support that progesterone production. But few and far between, it's this estrogen dominant issue. Try those things. Let me know if you have any questions. You can email me, check out my website, and that's it. We'll see you until next time.